Welcome back to the second segment of your Chapter 21 audio, Tale of Two Cities, Book 2, Chapter 21, Echoing Footsteps. We are on page 205, and hopefully you were able to answer those questions that I gave you for the first segment. Here we go. On a night in mid-July, 1779, Mr. Lorry came in late from Tellson's and sat himself down by Lucy and her husband in the dark window. It was a hot, wild night, and they were all three reminded of the old Sunday night when they had looked at the lightning from that same place. "I began to think," said Mr. Lorry, pushing his brown wig back, "that I should have to pass the night at Tellson's. We have been so full of business all day that we have not known what to do first, or which way to turn. There is such an uneasiness in Paris that we have actually a run of confidence upon us. Our customers over there seem not to be able to confide their property to us fast enough. There is positively a mania among some of them for sending it to England." "That has a bad look," said Darnay. "A bad look, you say, my dear Darnay? Yes, but we don't know what reason there is in it. People are so unreasonable. Some of us at Tellson's are getting old, and we really can't be troubled out of the ordinary course without due occasion." "Still," said Darnay, "you know how gloomy and threatening the sky is." "I know that, to be sure," assented Mr. Lorry, trying to persuade himself that his sweet temper was soured and that he grumbled. "But I am determined to be peevish after my long day's botheration. Where is Manette?" "Here he is," said the doctor, entering the dark room at the moment. "I'm quite glad you are home, for these hurries and forebodings by which I have been surrounded all day long have made me nervous without reason. You are not going out, I hope?" "No. I'm going to play backgammon with you, if you'd like," said the doctor. "I don't think I do like, if I may speak my mind, for I am not fit to be pitted against you tonight. Is the tea-board still there, Lucy? I can't see." "Of course, it has been kept for you." "Thank you, my dear. The precious child is safe in bed, and sleeping soundly." "That's right, all safe and sound. I don't know why anyone should be otherwise than safe and sound and well here, thank God. But I must have been so put out all day, and I'm not as young as I was. My tea, my dear. Thank ye. Now come and take your place in the circle, and let us sit quiet and hear the echoes about which you have had your theory." "Not a theory. It was a fancy." "A fancy, then, my wise pet," said Mr. Lorry, patting her hand. "Oh, they are very numerous and very loud, though, are they not? Only hear them." We're going to go to France now. France. Okay. Headlong, mad, and dangerous footsteps to force their way into anybody's life. Footsteps not easily made clean again if once stained red. The footsteps raging in St. Antoine afar off as the little circle sat in the dark London window. St. Antoine had been that morning a vast dusky mask of scarecrows heaving to and fro, with frequent gleams of light above the billowy heads, where steel blades and bayonets shone in the sun. A tremendous roar arose from the throat of St. Antoine, and a forest of naked arms struggled in the air like shriveled branches of trees in a winter wind, all the fingers convulsively clutching at every weapon, or semblance of a weapon that was thrown up from the depths below, no matter how far off. Who gave them out? Whence they last came? Where they began? Through what agency they crookedly quivered and jerked? Scores at a time over the heads of the crowd, like a kind of lightning, no eye in the throng could have told. But muskets were being distributed. So were cartridges, powder, and bars of iron and wood, knives, axes, pikes. Every weapon that distracted ingenuity could discover or devise. People who could lay hold of nothing else set themselves with bleeding hands to force stones and bricks out of their places in walls. Every pulse and heart in St. Antoine was on high fever strain and at high fever heat. Every living creature there held life as of no account, and was demented with a passionate readiness to sacrifice it. As a whirlpool of boiling waters has a center point, so all this rage circled around Defarge's wine shop, and every human drop in the cauldron had a tendency to be stacked toward the vortex, where Defarge himself, already begrimed with gunpowder and sweat, issued orders, issued arms, thrust this man back, dragged this man forward, disarmed one to arm another, labored and strove in the thickest of the uproar. "Keep near to me, Jacques 3," cried Defarge, And do you, Jack 1 and 2, separate and put yourselves in the head of us, many of these patriots as you can. I'm going to read that again. Keep near to me, Jacques 3, cried Defarge, and do you, Jacques 1 and 2, separate and put yourselves at the head of us, as many patriots as you can. Where is my wife? Well, here you see me, said Madame, composed as ever, but not knitting today. Madame's resolute right hand was occupied with an axe in place of the usual softer implements, and in her girdle were a pistol and a cruel knife. Where did you go, my wife? I go, said Madame, with you at present. You shall see me at the head of women by and by. Come then, cried Defarge in a resounding voice. Patriots and friends, we are ready. The Bastille! With a roar that sounded as if all the breath in France had been slapped into the detested word, the living sea rose, wave on wave, depth on depth, and overflowed the city to that point. Alarm bells ringing, drums beating, the sea raging and thundering on its new beach, the attack began. Deep ditches, double drawbridge, massive stone walls, 8 great towers, cannon, muskets, fire and smoke. Through the fire and through the smoke, in the fire and in the smoke, for the sea cast him up against a cannon, and on the instant he became a cannoneer. Defarge of the wine shop worked like a manful soldier. 2 fierce hours. Deep ditch, single drawbridge, massive stone walls, 8 great towers, cannon, muskets, fire and smoke. 1 drawbridge down. Work, comrades all, work! Work, Jacques 1, Jacques 2, Jacques 1,000, Jacques 2,000, Jacques 25,000, in the name of all the angels or the devils, which you prefer, work. Thus Defarge of the wine shop still at his gun, which had long grown hot. To me, women, cried Madame, his wife. What? We can kill as well as the men, and when the place is taken. And to her, with a shrill, thirsty cry, trooping women variously armed, but all armed alike in hunger and revenge. Cannon, muskets, fire, and smoke, but still the deep ditch, the single drawbridge, the massive stone walls, and the 8 great towers, slight displacements of the raging sea made by the falling wounded, flashing weapons, blazing torches, smoking wagon loads of wet straw, hard work at neighboring barricades in all directions, shrieks, volleys, execrations, bravery without stint, boom, smash, and rattle, and the furious sounding of the living sea, but still the deep ditch, and the single drawbridge, and the massive stone walls, and the 8 great towers, and still Defarge of the wine shop at his gun, grown doubly hot by the service of 4 fierce hours. A white flag from within the fortress, and a parley, this dimly perceptible through the raging storm, nothing audible in it. Suddenly the sea rose immeasurably wider and wider, and swept Defarge of the wine shop over the lower drawbridge, past the massive stone outer walls, in among the 8 great towers surrendered. So resistless was the force of the ocean bearing him on, that even to draw his breath or turn his head was as impractical as if he had been struggling in the surf of the South Sea, until he was landed in the outer courtyard of the Bastille. There, against an angle of a wall, he made a struggle to look about him. Jacques 3 was nearly at his side. Madame Defarge, still heading some of her women, was visible in the inner distance, and her knife was in her hand. Everywhere was tumult, exultation, deafening and maniacal bewilderment, astounding noise, yet furious dumb show. The prisoners, the records, the secret cells, the instruments of torture, the prisoners. Of all these cries and 10,000 incoherencies, the prisoners were the cry most taken up by the sea that rushed in, as if there were an eternity of people as well as of time and space. When the foremost billows rolled past, bearing the prison officers with them, and threatening them all with instant death if any secret nook remained undisclosed, Defarge laid his strong hand on the breast of one of these men, a man with a gray beard, who had a lighted torch in his hand, separated him from the rest, and got him between himself and the wall. Show me the North Tower, said Defarge. Quick! I will, faithfully, replied the man, if you will come with me, but there is no one there. What is the meaning of 105 North Tower? Said Defarge. Quick! The meaning, monsieur? Does it mean a captive or a place of captivity? Or do you mean that I shall strike you dead? Kill him, croaked Jacques 3, who had come up close. Monsieur, it is a cell. Show me then. Pass this way then. Jacques Three, with his usual craving on him, and evidently disappointed by the dialogue taking a turn that did not seem to promise bloodshed, held by Defarge's arm as he held by the turnkey's. Their three heads had been close together during this brief discourse, and it had been as much as they could do to hear one another, even then. So tremendous was the noise of the living ocean in its interruption into the fortress, and its inundation of the courts and passages and staircases. All around outside, too, it beat the walls with a deep, hoarse roar, from which occasionally some partial shouts of tumult broke and leaped into the air like spray. Through gloomy vaults where the light of day had ever shone, past hideous doors of dark dens and cages, down cavernous flights of steps, and again up steep rugged ascents of stone and brick, more like dry waterfalls than staircases, Defarge, the turnkey, and Jacques Three, linked hand and arm, went with all the speed they could make. Here and there, especially at first, the inundation started on them and swept by, but when they had done descending and were winding and climbing up a tower, they were alone. Hemmed in here by the massive thickness of walls and arches, the storm within the fortress and without was only audible to them in a dull, subdued way, as if the noise out of which they had come had almost destroyed their sense of hearing. The turnkey stopped at a low door and put a key in a clashing lock, swung the door slowly open, and said, as they all bent their heads and passed on, 105 North Tower. There was a small, heavily gated, unglazed window, high in the wall, with a stone screen before it, so that the sky could be only seen by stooping low and looking up. There was a small chimney, heavily barred across, a few feet within. There was a heap of old feathery wood ashes on the hearth. There was a stool, a table, and a straw bed. There were the 4 blackened walls and a rusted iron ring in one of them. Pass that torch slowly along these walls, that I may see them, said Defarge to the turnkey. The man obeyed, and Defarge followed the light closely with his eyes. Stop! Look there, Jacques! A.M. croaked Jacques Three, as he read greedily. Alexandre Minette, said Defarge in his ear, following the letters with his swart forefinger, deeply ingrained with gunpowder. And here he wrote, a poor physician. And it was he, without doubt, who scratched a calendar on this stone. What is that in your hand? A crowbar? Give it me. He had still the linstock of his gun in his own hand. He made a sudden exchange of the 2 instruments, and turning on the worm-eaten stool and table, beat them to pieces in a few blows. Hold the light higher, he said wrathfully to the turnkey. Look among those fragments with care, Jacques, and see. Here is my knife, throwing it to him. Rip open that bed and search the straw. Hold the light higher, you. With a menacing look at the turnkey, he crawled upon the hearth, and peering up at the chimney, struck and preased its sides with the crowbar, and worked at the iron grating across it. In a few minutes some mortar and dust came down, which he averted his face to avoid, and in it, and in the old wood ashes, and in the crevice in the chimney into which his weapon had slipped or wrought himself, he groped with a cautious touch. Nothing in the wood, and nothing in the straw, Jacques? Nothing. Let us collect them together in the middle of the cell. So light them, you. The turnkey fired the little pile, which blazed high and hot. Stooping again to come out at the low arched door, they had left it burning, and retraced their way to the courtyard, seeming to recover their sense of hearing as they had come down, until they were in the raging flood once more. They found it surging and tossing in quest of Defarge himself. Saint Antoine was clamorous to have its wine shopkeeper foremost in the guard upon the governor, who had defended the Bastille and shot the people. Otherwise the governor would not be marched to the Hôtel de Ville for judgment. Otherwise the governor would escape, and the people's blood, suddenly of some value, after many years of worthlessness, be unavenged. In the howling universe of passion and contention that seemed to encompass this grim old officer, conspicuous in his gray coat and red decoration, there was but one quite steady figure, and that was a woman's. See, there is my husband, she cried, pointing at him. See, Defarge. She stood immovable close to the grim old officer, and remained immovable close to him, through the streets, as Defarge and the rest bore him along. Remained immovable close to him when he got near his destination, and began to be struck at from behind. Remained immovable close to him when the long-gathering rain of stabs and blows fell heavy, was so close to him when he dropped dead under it, that suddenly animated she put her foot upon his neck, and with her cruel knife long ready,